So, as you may have guessed from the song, we are talking about faithfulness today, and this is an ongoing message in our series on fruits of the Spirit. And this is based off of a verse from the Bible in Galatians where it talks about various attributes that are fruits of the Spirit. We've talked about quite a few already. There's only a couple more to go. We talked about, what did we talk about? Patience and kindness, and help me out. How do you remember what we talked about? I can't. Sorry, I couldn't make that out. Forbearance, yeah, patience. Anyway, we talked about a lot of great things, and hopefully you remember them better than I do. But it's been very refreshing for me because, as Pastor Donnie mentioned at the beginning when we first started this series, a lot of the words seem very simple, like, oh, patience, kindness, faithfulness. Yeah, we've heard these things. We kind of know what they mean. Like, I generally get that. But when we dig more deeply into them and what they actually mean in our life and what God's version of those things versus just like our concept of what they are, there's really a lot to learn and a lot to gain, at least I've found. So anyway, today we're talking about faithfulness. These are fruits, so they're not necessarily just experiences. Most of us will have the experience of being joyful one day, or being kind, or having that joy or kindness expressed to us. But what we're talking about in this series is about how these characteristics or these qualities can become a part of us. They're a part of the way we live our life. They're a part of the way that we express ourselves with the people in our lives. So I want to talk a little bit about faithfulness today. So Google says that being faithful means to be loyal, dependable, and trustworthy, and to be true to one's word, commitments, and beliefs. It can also mean to be firm in one's adherence to duty or promises. So, this is an aspect of God that we are trying to gain. I think that all of us believe that God is faithful, that God keeps his promises, that God is true to his word. I think that if we didn't believe that, it would be hard to believe in a God that's not like that. It'd be kind of depressing. But as we know God more in our lives, as we walk through our journey of faith in our life, this is something that should develop naturally because we put our faith in God, we make promises with God, and we see the fruits of those over time. And we see that God not only has not forsaken us, but God fulfills his promises, God answers prayers, even when we have our own doubts and we don't see the ways in which he is working. But before I go any further, I want to make a discernment. I want to make a distinction, and that there's a big difference between belief and faith. According to Gallup poll, May of 2023, 74% of Americans said they believe in God, which is significantly down, but still not a terrible percentage. But Pew Research found that 90% of Americans believe in a higher power of some kind, whether it's God or whether it's the biblical God. It may not be exactly, but 90% of Americans believe in a higher power of some kind, which is kind of amazing if you think about it, because you look around the world, it doesn't seem that way, right? Do we walk around and interact with people? Does it seem like most people believe in God? No, not really, right? And I'm not going to jump to any conclusions about why that is, but I do think that it's important to make a clear distinction that there is a big difference between a belief and I'm sure that people have their reasons for believing in God or not believing in God. But there's a big difference between belief and faith. Faith is not just a belief, but it's a way of life. It's a lifestyle that involves trust and reliance. And in fact, I actually think it's very possible to have a belief in something, belief in God, but not actually have faith, faithful or like a relationship with that God as part of a meaningful part of my life. This is from our true father, founder of our faith. He said, life of faith is a life of attending God. Life or faith, sorry, I don't know what's going on with me today. Maybe I need to slow down. Faith means living in attendance to God, living together with God and attending him. If we do not walk such a path, we feel uneasy. We feel physically uncomfortable, and we meet obstacles in our environment. A life of faith is a life of living together with God and attending him. So what this says to me is that in order to have a life of faith in a relationship with God, not just a belief system, it actually involves, it's a process, and it's a relationship. And it means that we actually need to not just believe in God, but we need to actually make room in our life for God. We need to give God a little bit of space in my life, making my decisions. You know, maybe you're thinking an important decision or difficulty in your life that you're dealing with. You know, have you thought to ask God to be a part of that process? Because, you know, of course we can do our best based off of the wisdom of our elders and peers and common sense and, you know, our own grit, you know, to do the right thing and to make the best decisions we can in life. But I think that a faithfulness, a life with God, also means that, you know, we want God to be a part of our life. We want God to be a part of those decisions, and we want God to be a part of our solutions. I think that's important. And not just those big things, but even our daily activities involving God. God is faithful. That's something that we understand. But we human beings, we go up and down. Sometimes in a moment of difficulty or crisis, we will reach out to God, we'll make promises to God, make commitments to God, but we don't always follow through. And sometimes inspiration wears off or difficulties come and we get discouraged. It's easy to say that when things are going well, God is good. But then when things are not going well, or they're not going the way that we think they should, or they're not happening as quickly as we wish they would, it's easy to lose faith in God or even to blame God. At the same time, being faithful, I don't think would be that meaningful if it was easy, or if the answers of why things are happening were obvious. So I think it's understandable that we have our doubts. We go through our dry periods, our difficulties. One way that we see this a lot is inspiration, right? Many times we'll have a God experience, or we'll have a really inspiring prayer or a moment at a workshop, a retreat, an event, and we get really inspired. And when the inspiration wears off, which it always does, maybe a few months later or a few years later, what are we left with? Many times we're just left with the memory of the experience. But more than the memory, the substance behind that experience, like, well, maybe I made a pact, a promise, a commitment with God, but maybe I don't really feel it anymore. Well, that pact is still there. That promise is still there. But you know, in the moment, we may not really feel very inspired about it, or maybe we just feel discouraged, like, I don't know if I can hold up my end. I don't know if I can do the thing that I promised to do. This is very similar, in my mind, to another way that we use the word faithful. We use the word faithful in marriage a lot, don't we? In marriage, you know, we pledge, we take vows, we say, I'm going to be faithful to you. And we didn't take the traditional marriage vows, but I think they're quite beautiful. I just can't remember them in the moment. Through sickness and health and I should have written it down, is what I should have done. For richer, for poor. What was the last part? For better or for worse. The general gist of it is that no matter what happens in our life, between us as a couple, we're going to commit to loving one another and caring for one another and being faithful to one another. And being faithful is not always just, oh, I'm not going to cheat on you, right? It also means like, I'm going to give you my all. Like, even if you're down in the dumps, I'm not going to give up on you. Even if you're, being very immature or doing something stupid, we're going to care for one another. We're going to lift one another up, and we're going to create something new as a couple. That's the idea behind marriage and those vows, which is really, really quite beautiful. But it's also it's an aspect of being faithful, right? Being faithful is not just an attitude that we have towards God, our Heavenly Parent. Being faithful is actually an attitude or a character that we can apply to pretty much any area of your life. It's a characteristic that we need to nurture and grow, because it's something that actually, if you apply it to all areas of your life, to your promises, your dreams, your work situation, your friends, your spouse, your children, and you say, you apply those same vows to all the areas of your life that are important to you, you're going to live a really rich life, I believe. Those kind of people, you find those kind of people, the faithful people, the people who will be faithful to their friends. Even in a situation, they make a promise, and in order to fulfill that promise, they have to be set back a little bit, or it's going to cost them something, but they're going to do it anyway because they're going to follow through with what they promised. I mean, these people are gems. You want those kind of people surrounding you in your life, and we want to be those kind of people to the people in our life. So faithfulness is, don't get me wrong, we're a church and we're talking about being faithful to God, but this is something that goes way beyond just our relationship with God. It's something that if we cultivate it in our relationship with God, it's natural that it will permeate into other aspects of our life too, which is what we want. But inspiration is one of those things that, we can have that moment where we feel really like up here. But we have to remember that being faithful is not just about fulfilling our commitments when we're feeling really good. It's about whatever the situation comes along. There was a reason that thing happened. We moved here 10 years ago to become pastors, and when we moved here, we were a little bit, yes, we knew what we were getting into to some degree, but there was definitely a certain high that came from, oh yeah, we're moving across country where we got 3 kids and a U-Haul, and it was exciting, it was new, it was different, what are we getting into? It's kind of an adventure, right? And that wore off pretty fast. I don't remember how long 6 months, a year, whatever. And then after a while, you're like, oh yeah, we're doing another Children's Day message and the sermon. What are we going to talk about? We've talked about this already and that already, and it's like, so there's moments where it's like, you don't feel any inspiration, So we really felt that, God was calling us to do this, but the inspiration to do it didn't last that long. But you don't want to give up on something that you knew was super important at the time just because you don't feel inspired about it now. And so it's been amazing of these last 10 years as the cycles, right, of inspiration and then discouragement and the ups and the downs. And there's been so many variety of experiences, but if we had just stopped because we weren't inspired, we would have missed out on all that. And that's the unfortunate thing with a lot of relationships today. It's almost like a consumerism mentality, like, I want to be with you until I don't like being with you anymore, and I can go find somebody else. And that's, it's unfortunate because every relationship's going to have these down points. And if you don't go through them and get to the other side, you'll never experience what it feels like to be beyond that and to be better, deeper. Our marriage has been the same way. It's been 20 years. There's been tough times. And if we had, decided that we wanted to go find someone else during those difficult times, and we wouldn't be able to experience what we have now. So, faithfulness. So, in providence, in the Bible, and history, we see a lot of people that God touched in a very powerful way, and many stories of victory, right? But also many stories of people losing their faith over time. Probably one of the best examples is John the Baptist, since it's Christmas time. Maybe as appropriate of time as any to talk about him. But there's a couple quotes that I wanted to read on that. In Jesus' day, there must have been many, many Jews whose faith was so ardent that they could perform miracles in God's name. Yet, since they believed that Elijah himself would descend from heaven before the Messiah came, it was hard for them to accept that Elijah was present among them as John the Baptist. All the more so because of John's denial. Hence, they did not accept Jesus as the Messiah and ostracized him from the community. Consequently, Jesus had to abandon them in tears. In like manner, at the second advent of Christ, those Christians who expect his miraculous and glorious appearance will almost certainly reject him if he comes in the flesh of humble birth. No matter how faithful they may be, the Lord will be left with no choice but to abandon them because they have transgressed against God. The Jewish people stood upon the foundation of faith laid by John the Baptist and followed John as if they were following the Messiah. Thereupon, they brought an end to the Old Testament age and were ready to embark upon a new course to restore Canaan worldwide. Yet, as was explained earlier, John the Baptist harbored doubts toward Jesus. Even though he had testified to him, he sent a delegation and asked Jesus, "Are you he who is to come, or shall we look for another?" He denied that he was Elijah, even though he in fact came to fulfill Elijah's mission. This not only blocked the Jewish people's path to Jesus, it even led them to oppose him. In effect, John left the position of Abel, depriving the Jewish people of the central person with whom they could fulfill the indemnity condition to remove the fallen nature. This blocked their way to complete the foundation of substance or the foundation for the Messiah. Consequently, the first worldwide course to restore Canaan was aborted. As was the case in Moses' days, it was prolonged to a second and then a third course. So, even though John's faith or lack of faith had very large repercussions, I think that in some ways we can all relate a little bit. Like, I kind of get John, like you have an experience, maybe a really spiritual experience, or a really deep prayer, but then over time it can be kind of easy to doubt those things. Oh, did that really happen? Is this really the way I should go? It's kind of uncomfortable. I mean, John had a lot to lose, honestly. He had a lot of reputation, a lot of followers. He had a lot of, he just had a lot of foundation that he built up, and he was supposed to offer all of that to Jesus. It's a lot to ask of somebody, to be honest. You work hard your whole life, you struggle, you suffer, you live, and you win people's respect and their acknowledgement, and then you're just supposed to give that to somebody else. And the thinking is, what am I left with at the end of the day? Of course, God had plans. Of course, John would have been really elevated, and he would have been like the right hand of Jesus. But John didn't know that. But I don't know about you. I've had many experiences where I've had some kind of an inspiration or deep experience, and then later on I'm like, I don't know, did that really matter? It's okay. God didn't really think I was going to follow through with that anyway. But even still, we can make excuses or reasons, but and it's a growing process. It's definitely not something that we're just going to have. But over time, as we walk in our life of faith and our journey with God, and as we make promises to God, and as we have our prayers with God, and as we see God working, one of the amazing things about being a pastor is that more so than I think most people, we get a chance to see a little bit, a glimpse into most people's lives. And we get to see God working in ways that maybe you're not aware of, because we're not going to talk about how God worked in this person's so easily. That's their testimony. But to be seeing God working in people's lives is really amazing. And you see it enough times, and you see it enough times in your own life, and you go through experiences where you doubt God, and then you realize, oh, God was working anyway. Then you start to feel really silly, a little bit shameful to have doubted so much. I think we have an idea of what we think it means to make a promise, to say, I believe in you, I have faith in you. For us, we could throw those words out really casually. It doesn't really mean much. But we forget that we're not like, God is not like that. God does not do those things and say those kind of things and not mean it. So a couple verses from the Bible, from Luke. One who is faithful is very little. In very little is also faithful in much. And one who is dishonest in very little is also dishonest in much. So it's kind of like, for me, reinforces the idea that faithfulness, like all of these fruits, is something that is not just meant for our relationship with God. It's meant as a way of life. It's meant as the way that we treat one another. We treat our spouse, we treat our kids, we treat our parents with faithfulness. A filial child is someone who is faithful to his or her parents out of love for them. A patriot is someone who loves his or her country. And a saint, that is a world-level saint, is someone who loves the world. So being faithful is not just having our belief in God, but it means to give God space to guide our lives, to trust in God, to seek God's direction in the things that we are doing. And then we step out in faith and we see what happens. That's my message. Please join me in prayer. Dearest Heavenly Parent, thank you for this day. I'm so grateful for all brothers and sisters who came today to gather together as a community and as a family. Heavenly Parent, please, we pray for your presence and your spirit to be a part of this gathering, Heavenly Parent, to be with all your children, Heavenly Parent, who are gathering together this morning, and whether they're at church or not. And I just pray, Heavenly Parent, that as we have been going through these series and we're entering, Christmas season and everything, that we can really take to heart these fruits, Heavenly Parent, that are who you are. You are all these things, Heavenly Parent, and we to really resemble your children in substance, Heavenly Parent, we want to live our life also with these fruits, Heavenly Parent, that we can, whoever we're with and whatever we're doing, they can see your spirit, your character, and your love in action in our lives, Heavenly Parent. And yes, we're going to stumble and make mistakes and fall short many times, Heavenly Parent, but please give us the strength and the encouragement to always keep going, to strive to be better, Heavenly Parent, to be more like you, to build families that really resemble you, your heart and your desire and your ideal for this world, Heavenly Parent, to really make this world a better place, to reshape it in the image that you have always had for it, Heavenly Parent. We thank you, we love you, and we offer this prayer on behalf of all of our blessed families here. Amen and adieu. Thank you.